Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.
This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha.
It just doesn't feel great after you've really dug deep. You do this personal thing, you make this project, you usually are really battling to try to be very honest about it, about yourself, and then you have to flip some kind of switch and write some grant proposal or something that explains it. And that's a real skill. It takes a lot of practice to actually learn how to do that.
There's a lot involved in the arts that don't involve creativity.
I would invite you to ask yourself, how much do you love art, and how can you engage with art more often?
You may have all kinds of great artists doing wonderful work and nowhere to show it, nowhere to display it.
We've said recently on this show that an art scene can't exist without thriving artists. On today's St. Louis on the Air, we'll discuss trends in artist funding in St. Louis and other Midwest spots, and talk with two recipients of local artist grants. Forbes magazine contributor Chad Scott recently wrote, quite glowingly I might add, about St. Louis as a place that stands out among cities for its prioritization of the arts. Chad, welcome to the program.
Nice being here, Elaine. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, as a writer for Forbes, you explore, again, that intersection of arts and travel. And just last month, you wrote a feature about St. Louis's Grand Center Arts District, which is where our station happens to be. How did you come to or upon Grand Center to begin with?
I was invited by the Visit St. Louis folks as part of a press trip of national arts writers to come and explore the entire city for the arts community. So I was in town for 2 or 3 days. We went to St. Louis Art Museum. We went to Missouri Botanical Gardens. We saw a lot, but I was most I don't want to say impressed. I was most taken, most surprised by Grand Center because it was such a dense variety of artistic offerings, from music to literature to the circus to Powell Hall and performing arts, visual arts, that I had not come across previously, that density and that diversity in any of my travels. And I'm somewhere around the country about twice a month looking at art.
Wow. And had you been familiar with any of the spaces in Grand Center before you actually got here?
I was aware of the Pulitzer because that is such a profound, organization, foundation, program they've got going on there. I've written about some of their shows previously, but otherwise no. And my brother lived in St. Louis, 15, 20 years ago and loved it. And we would do Forest Park and the zoo with the kids and all that kind of stuff. But it's only been recently when I've gotten so into the arts and culture scene. So as familiar as I was with St. Louis, and he actually worked at SLU, which of course is right near there, but not being into the art scene and this area kind of emerging in the last handful of years to what it is now. Obviously, the Fox and Powell Hall and that stuff have been there for a long time, and the Pulitzer has been there for a long time. But what I was really most interested in is this the Kranzberg Foundation support and these artist spaces, these studio spaces, the literature, kind of more of the bottom up than the top down. I think arts communities, of course, are easy to define by the high end, right? I mean, and the St. Louis Art Museum is one of the best in the country. But an arts community much more evolves and develops from the bottom up: studios, galleries, artist spaces, community centers, and working artists, than it does from the top down in the major national institutions.
Yeah. Well, insofar as that top down and what that means, the Forbes feature that you wrote, which was titled America's Most Exciting Emerging Arts District is in St. Louis with a question mark. You did spend a lot of time on infrastructural development. So that's investments in property and venues, as well as big events like festivals. And you did single out sort of top down and bottom up when you talk with our producer. Can you give us a little bit more about what top down means in the context of arts?
Well, I mean, okay, so what's the peak of the St. Louis arts community is the St. Louis Arts Museum, right? I mean, they've got Van Gogh and they've got Matisse and they've got the big exhibitions. And, I visited when I was there, and it's easy and natural and obvious for visitors to St. Louis or residents. Well, let's go to the big museum, right? You go to New York, you go to the Met, you go to MoMA, you go to Chicago, you go to the Art Institute, you go to Detroit, you go to the Art Institute. I mean, that's natural, right? And then, okay, Powell Hall when it's in its season, or maybe you go see a big concert or a show or something like that. That's top down, the big institution sort of steering the ship. And that's fine. And St. Louis has, again, one of the top art museums in the country, bar none. But what I did not mention Slam in my piece because I was focused specifically on this arts district that is developing in Grand Center, and that's what really excited me. It's not the 100,000 square foot museum, it's the little art print shop, it's the literary coffee house, it's the circus there that has its season. It's Walls Off Washington that is emerging. That's what builds an arts district, an arts community. These are not one-offs. Let's take Chicago, for instance. I was in Chicago last week and visited the Art Institute. Art Institute's great, one of the best art museums in the world, but there's nothing else like arty around it. I mean, you've got the Bean in Millennial Park, but to get to the Contemporary Art Museum, it's 2 miles away, and to get to some of the galleries, it's even further than that. What I like about Grand Center and the focus of my piece was an arts district, one-stop shopping for music, theater, performance, visual arts, literary arts, museums like the Contemporary Art Museum and the Pulitzer, but also, outdoor art, street art like Walls Off Washington, and murals and graffiti stuff that's free, which obviously St. Louis excels in. So that's what excited me most about. You've got an arts hotel there. It's a critical mass of smaller buildings, when taken together, really packs an incredible wallop.
And is there anything that you've been observing, particularly in Midwestern cities, where they're taking an approach that's similar to the one that you saw in St. Louis?
Not to this degree. Every city I go to, of course, is trying, and I get pitched these stories all the time, is trying in some way or another to bolster its art offerings. Cleveland has a triennial, which is a big citywide, region-wide art festival that takes place every 3 years. That's what a triennial is, that they're very proud of. Detroit is working to develop some, neighborhood pockets focused on the arts and culture. Indianapolis has a very prominent mural arts scene. Milwaukee has a sculpture festival over the summer. All of these are well and good. And, Chicago's kind of off in a different stratosphere because it's so good. And it's really, Chicago is a museum town, more than it is, artist spaces or little galleries and that kind of thing. So Chicago's kind of on its own deal. But what so impressed me about St. Louis is it had this one area that had so many different options, because you may be a theater, opera person, your guests may be more into music, I'm a visual arts person. All of that exists in Grand Center, and it increasingly exists at street level, and it's artist operated. Again, it's ground up instead of, here are our hours, and here is our fee, and this is when you come. Yeah. What's happening in Grand Center is much more organic and lively and neighborhoody and community-focused, and that's a rare thing nationally, let alone around the Midwest.
Right. No, Insofar as what you were saying, you've mentioned community, you're mentioning the artists themselves. Was there anything that you were observing that points to collective financing, as it were, or more of that bottom-up approach that you were talking about? So, for example, artist statements.
A lot of my story was focused on the Kranzberg Arts Foundation, and what they do really supports bottom up, because they don't directly support artists. And I think a lot of your inspiration for discussing this was the Regional Arts Commission grants that are going out to organizations, but also individual artists. Mm-hmm. What I liked about the Kranzberg Art Foundation program is that it is really interested in artist venues and artist spaces and real estate, and sort of taking the logistical barriers out of artists finding spaces to do their work and sell their work and showcase their work. So again, when you think about bottom up, you may have all kinds of great artists doing wonderful work and nowhere to show it, nowhere to display it, nowhere for people to come and look at it. And again, that's what I think is so wonderful about Grand Center, is you've got these galleries, these artist spaces, outdoor, the murals. You have outdoor space, indoor space that provides for these artists locally to have a place to display and present their work and people to enjoy it, instead of having to go to Chicago or somewhere else where they have the gallery. So
right.
Ground up, you've got to have the artists working, and you're going to talk to some of those folks later. You've got to have a community of actual artists. But those artists then have to have a means to show people locally their art beyond social media. So these physical spaces that exist in Grand Center are exceptional and unusual, because they are, again, focused on local artists and that local arts community. Again, more so than St. Louis, Art Museum, which is great. They've got Matisse, they've got Van Gogh, they've got the big global names. Grand Center can take more of a local focus.
Yeah, and so it's really a case of, from your perspective, if you build it, they will come. The they being the artists. So
the artists maybe, but again, you have to have, as a community, as a city, you have to value the arts, and that not just value the arts in terms of we're going to support this with tax dollars or government support or foundation support. The residents there have to want this.
Yes.
The residents, there have to be enough residents to say, all these spaces, we're going to frequent these places,
and we're going to
go here and we're going to buy something and buy a beer, and we're going to buy a ticket.
We'll be getting right into that with the artists that we speak with. Chad, thank you so much for talking with us today.
My pleasure.
We need to take a quick break, but we'll be back shortly to continue this conversation with two local artists who've just gotten funding for their creative projects. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
Welcome back. Before the break, we spoke with Chad Scott, whose June 2nd Forbes feature on Grand Center Arts District in St. Louis had many folks abuzz about STL's art scene. Another bit of news broke just a couple weeks later. The Regional Arts Commission, or RAC, announced awardees of $4.5 million in individual artist grants, ranging from $1,000 to $7,500 each. We've said recently on this show that an art scene can't exist without thriving artists. So these RAC grants, which support very specific individual projects or goals, do make a significant difference. But there's only so much one or even two big arts orgs can do to support artists, and securing funds to sustain creative work is its own job, and in many ways, its own art. Here to talk with us about their approaches to the art of making money to finance their artistic endeavors, we welcome two local artists. Kasimu Taylor, trumpeter and lead musician of the Kasimu Tet. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Carlos Salazar-Lermont, visual and performance artist. Welcome to you too.
Thank you so much.
And congratulations to you both on receiving RAC grants, that is, this year. Let's jump right into the conversation about making art and making money for it.
Right.
So, Kasimu, you've been playing trumpet for quite some time, since you were
Yes.
11, I believe.
11, 12, yeah.
So at what point did making music and making money come together for you?
It's funny you ask that question. So my first band director, Mr. Johnson, when I was 12, I guess he saw something in me at that time. I guess I had a nice sound at an early age. And he actually had me play at his church for Easter.
Okay.
And wrote me a check for $60. I thought, I was like, whoa.
That's a lot.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So at that point, I was like, oh, wow, maybe we can make some money doing this too.
And what is the range of work that you've done throughout your career to fund your music and musicianship?
Oh, wow. So the range of work, music or otherwise, like service industry work, the hospitality industry. I worked in that industry for a long time.
Yeah.
And the way I look at those type of jobs, I look at it as, a way to have capital to fund what I truly want to do.
So it was really instrumental, like figuratively and literally.
Oh yeah,
then.
definitely.
Yeah.
And like you can't make art if you don't have basic life necessities.
Right, having that covered. And has your time as a musician, has it all happened here in St. Louis, or have you spent time in other places?
Yeah, it's all happened here in St. Louis. I feel like definitely if you want to like take things to, I guess, a larger level, you kind of have to. You used to have to leave St. Louis, but I think in this day and age with social media, like I have so many contacts through social media all around the world, like you can really kind of hone in and take advantage of the cost of living in St. Louis and still be able to have a broader reach.
Right, right. Now, Carlos, you have been deep in the arts for many years, but adding the title of artist and specifically visual and performance art is something that's newer for you. So did the realities of making money for your art, kind of the way that Kasimu has talked about, while making a living, has that had anything to do with your taking on artist a little bit later?
Well, actually, I didn't take art later. I started very, very young, and I started performing internationally when I was 21, which was like 14 years ago or something like that. So I already had started. I'm having a confusion, but yeah, actually, I've been doing art and performing and showing in exhibitions, and I started doing art administration later as a means of trying to fill some gaps that existed in the environment where I was, which back in that time was Venezuela.
Okay.
Performance art performance art is still today a little bit relegated to like sideshow sometimes by institutions, museums. Now there's a little bit more of interest into that. But back in the time, is performance artists didn't start our events, didn't curate them, didn't produce them, they wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
So that's what motivated me to start organizing international and local events. And now I think I'm a little bit more focused on my own practice because I feel that it's a little bit different from Venezuela.
Okay.
Here in the U.S., there are a little bit more opportunities, but still many artists are taking initiative to organize events or administrate spaces, both here in St. Louis or Chicago or places as they were mentioning earlier.
Yeah. Is there something about the kind of art, Carlos, that you make that presents challenges to procuring funding for it, whether it is through grants or for other means? I mean, you did talk about sort of the level of awareness or maybe acceptance, general acceptance in Venezuela, but...
Yeah, I have a very wide scope of working. Some of them are very focused on like community, it's like community engaged projects, very social, very political, and there's another type of work that's a little bit more introspective, more philosophical, and that kind of work sometimes takes me to a more radical way of doing work that it's not necessarily something that you could put. Well, maybe you can put it on top of your sofa if you want,
okay.
right? But it's a strong image. It's
right.
a strong image, and it's challenging,
mm-hmm.
right? So I have had different levels of success with both type of work. Mm-hmm. Definitely, the community engaged type of work is easier to get funding and support because it gets it solves some problems of other kind at the same time.
Right.
But sometimes as a performance artist, the kind of support you get is you get free tickets to go somewhere else, mm-hmm. to present your work, to travel internationally. You get to travel and you get to some help on producing your work that otherwise you wouldn't do by yourself.
Right.
Especially places like the Defibrillator Gallery was crucial. That was in Chicago. That was crucial in me coming to the U.S. It made a big difference.
Right. Kasimu, as you've heard Carlos talking about the different ways that he has, as sort of a side endeavor, mm-hmm. Made art and shown it, performed it, how has your music served you when you were not serving in a restaurant or doing one of those other jobs?
So the first, I guess, professional gig I ever played was when I was 19. And I was with one of my mentors, friends, Chad Evans. So that was like the first time I was out and I'm in a club and I'm playing. So from that moment on, I feel like, and that was a lot of years ago. Mm-hmm. I've been able to, play with super unique people and all across the country. Mm-hmm. Totally different genres, from soul, old school soul, R&B music to jazz to funk, disco.
So have some of the challenges in financing your work, has that also been something that has impeded your ability to explore new things or different things?
Yes. So as Carlos knows, there's a lot involved in the arts that don't involve creativity. So in order to say if you have this super ambitious idea to put on this show, you have to pay for the musicians, you have to pay for the venue and things of that nature. So having all that in place before you even get the creative thing going can be
really difficult.
Big challenge.
Yeah. Now, there's been a lot of attention to money that is given to individual artists by these big organizations. Mm-hmm. But what is it that you want people to know about support for individual artists that comes from the community, and maybe something that people miss because St. Louis is known for charitable giving for the arts? Carlos?
Yeah, well, I really, really want to reiterate what Chad was saying earlier, that one thing is the support that the private or public institutions give, or something that cannot be replaced is the love you feel for art. So if someone is listening to this right now, which it's of course a lot of people, I will invite you to ask yourself, how much do you love art, and how can you engage with art more often? And what can you give to make St. Louis art scene richer one? Am I going to see local artists? Am I buying artists' work? Am I going to local galleries? And everyone can support and can contribute in the level of their possibilities. If you cannot buy a $10,000 work to donate for a museum, but some people can, right? And should, maybe you can buy a smaller artwork.
Carlos Salazar-Lermont is a visual and performance artist, and Kasimu Taylor is a trumpeter and head of the group Kasimu Tet. Thank you both for joining us today.
Today's episode was produced by Aaron Dorr, with audio engineering and podcast design by Aaron. Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
St. Louis on the Air proudly supports local artists by using music from Life Creative Group.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.